Good evening. We are very excited to have our third and final workshop in the frames of American Film Showcase in Armenia 2021. And today we have an opportunity to listen to a very interesting and important workshop by Lara Stolman, who is going to talk about distribution strategies for independent documentary filmmakers. Lara is a filmmaker, she's a producer and director, and I should mention that Armenian audience had the opportunity to see her film Swim Team during the previous edition of American Film Showcase in Armenia, which was in 2018. So for everyone who are not fluent in English and would like to follow the talk in Armenian, you can just choose the interpretation in the bottom and change the language into Korean. This time it's Korean, not Chinese, and listen to Armenian. And for everyone who has questions, you can type it in Q&A section, and at the end we will be reading those and answering. So I won't be visible on the screen, but I'll be here and we'll be ready to help if there is any technical problem. So I'll be back at the end. Thank you very much, Lara, and the screen is yours.
Well, thank you. I want to say thank you also to American Film Showcase, and thank you to the U.S. Embassy in Armenia. I am so pleased to be able to talk to you today, and I look forward to hearing from you when we're finished in the Q&A. So I'm going to speak to you about distribution strategy for independent documentary films. I know this talk was advertised as self-distribution, and the first thing that I wanted to say is to call it self-distribution is really a misnomer. In filmmaking, no filmmaker is an island. You really can't do anything by yourself. It's a collaborative medium. And in distribution, just like in production, you really need a crew. So when we talk about self-distribution, what we're really talking about is independent distribution, or as I like to say, distribution strategy for documentary films. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the trailer for my film, my last film, and it's called Swim Team. And here we go.
Guys, give the best that you got. Who's with me? Hammerhead! Hammerhead!
Some kids, they stare at me, who's this fast kid?
The front stroke may be a little bit tough, but the breaststroke may be really hard.
As I know, autistic means some person that's different than other kids.
Our team, they have some type of autism spectrum disorder, which is not very common for a swim team.
Coaching a special needs team versus a regular swim team, it's night and day.
I know the kid's mom. Just have to work with him a little bit. He's good though.
If you are the fastest swimmer, me and Mike will take care of who wants to be faster than us.
So many people don't give our kids a chance to do anything.
There's no resources for these children. They just gonna send him to Walmart so he can stock. It's not what we want.
Kelvin feels frustrated about his kids.
People stare at him, laugh at him.
He cannot control that. He's not doing those on purpose.
One time or other, all our kids get ostracized. Michael goes, why did God make me different, Dick? What did I do wrong? We said, because you're special. God made you special. Oh, a lot of normal boys can't do what you do.
Dr. Phelps, he got 23 gold medals. Now bronze. One gold gets you one card for this.
When I'm swimming, I feel normal. Feels amazing when I swim.
Give the kids an opportunity. The whole thing is you can't give up on your child.
Best
So that's the trailer for my last film, Swim Team. Swim Team is a feature documentary. It's about the rise of a competitive swim team of teenagers on the autism spectrum. It made its debut on the International Film Festival circuit in 2016. It was released theatrically in the summer of 2017. It aired on PBS's POV in October of that year. It's streamed on Netflix the following April. It's on iTunes and Amazon and currently being distributed on television and digitally internationally. It's in libraries, universities, and has been shown on airlines. We've also had over 200 community screenings and corporate events worldwide, including many events with myself and cast members speaking in conjunction with the film. And we are still distributing this film 5 years after its debut. So that gives you a sense of the kind of reach you can have with an independent documentary. And Swim Team is an independent film, meaning I had no network, I had no studio, I had no distributor backing me when I made this film. And the film's distribution was strategized step by step. It all happened as a result of a master plan that I developed and have control of. And I'm going to talk to you now about how you can find your own plan for your film and take control of its distribution. So I mentioned Swim Team as an independent film. This was actually my first independent film. And before I made it, for years, I produced for networks and studios. I worked for companies like NBC and HBO, and they handled distribution in-house. And the way these companies were set up, producers like myself, we were completely separate and worked apart from the marketing teams, the scheduling teams, the programming teams. So I really never gave a thought to distribution because I didn't have to. I would hand off the program or the film when it was finished, and it was always distributed by the professionals elsewhere in the building. And my work was done when the shows were finished. And then I moved on to a new project. When I set out to make Swim Team, part of me didn't want to think about distribution because as an independent filmmaker, there's a lot you have to juggle, and it just seemed like it was too much. I wanted to put it off. I wanted to focus on the story. I wanted to focus on the production. But I soon learned as an independent filmmaker, nobody cares about your film as much as you. Films are really like your children, and you have to love and nurture them and advocate for them. And although many filmmakers, myself included, hope and pray for the dream, which is that you'll sell your film at Sundance to Netflix and be all set. But the reality is that most films actually don't get into Sundance, and those all rights kind of large deals for independent documentaries are really rare. Like 1 or 2 handful out of thousands of films a year get those kind of deals. So it's really not smart or realistic to expect that it will happen for your film. And you need to plan for plan B. And you need a strategy for distribution, really, whether you want to or not, if you want your film to succeed in the marketplace. So I started thinking about distribution before I finished my film when I was in post-production, and I educated myself with the help of leading consultants and experts. And now you're going to benefit from what I've learned because I'm going to walk you through my process. So here we see the difference between the all rights type of deal that I mentioned before and what I advocate, which is you can call it self-distribution, you can call it hybrid distribution, you can call it independent strategy. I like independent strategy for documentaries. The all rights deal is like the Sundance deal that I mentioned before. That's when a distributor buys your film and you're done. And hopefully they pay you enough that it was worth your while. And meaning you can pay any investors that you had, you can take profit, and the film gets seen by a large audience. Now, these type of deals, they vary in term limit, but they can last for a few years to as long as 25 years. The distributor buys all of the film's rights, meaning broadcast, digital, theatrical, educational, foreign, you name it. And the thing to keep in mind with these deals is that the filmmaker generally has little to no involvement in the distribution process. So no say in how the film is scheduled and on what platforms, windows, you have no access as the filmmaker to the audience. This is what it was like when I worked for NBC, when I worked for HBO, as I mentioned before. They decided when my films were broadcast and how many times, if they could be showcased at a film festival in advance. I really had no decision-making power. Now, the big problem with this option for documentary filmmakers is that so few all rights kind of deals are lucrative for documentaries. It's so rare to be offered enough in a deal like this to profit. And all rights distributors are not set up to tailor the deal in a way that makes sense for specific films. They may not offer educational distribution, for example, or even a theatrical release. With a social issue documentary, educational sales may be very important to you. With my film, I wanted a lot of community screenings, which are often referred to as non-theatrical or semi-theatrical screenings. And distributors generally are not as interested in these channels of distribution. The other problem that filmmakers complain about a lot with all rights deals is distributors generally have limited bandwidth for particular films because they have a library of films that they're working on. So often they may only devote a limited amount of time and energy to your film. And some films just don't get exploited the way they should. Some films are ignored. And finally, filmmakers cannot collect data on their audience with this model. And we'll talk about this more, but data is becoming more and more important for filmmakers as it is for content creators. Now, what's right about the other column, what I really like about this other column, the self-hybrid independent strategy column, is that if you're willing to put in the work, you can exploit every possible channel for distribution and build an audience that you can communicate with, learn from, and ultimately you can make a profit. You can keep on selling your film and make income indefinitely. When you collect names for a mailing list on your website, on your film's website, you can sell your film directly to your audience. Interact with that audience, grow it, and roll it on to a next film and on and on. So I'm a proponent of this kind of self-directed or hybrid distribution plan in which the filmmaker decides who to partner with for various channels of distribution and which rights to retain. You can make a TV broadcast deal, for example, but retain the theatrical rights, which is what I did. I chose a specific educational distributor based on priorities that I had, and I retained community screening rights so I could sell screenings directly from my website. So this is the model that I followed, and it made me more money than the distributors were offering me. It allowed me to push my film out in wider release, to more territories, and allows me to continue to sell my film and earn income on it, even while my distributor partners are selling my film and sending me checks. So this strategy commenced when I was in post-production, as I mentioned before, and I'm going to take you back actually now to the beginning of my distribution journey and walk you through step by step. Okay, so before I edited Swim Team, I decided to create a couple of samples of various lengths. Now, this is pretty important if you're applying for grants or you're otherwise seeking support. There were a number of grants that I applied for, and most documentary grants ask for samples. I made a sample that was just under 15 minutes. My finished film, by the way, ended up being 100 minutes. So I made this sample. It included an introduction to the story and the setting, and it also presented the three main characters in my film and gave a snapshot of each of their storylines. It also showcased the beautiful underwater footage that we had shot. And I sent the sample not just along with grant applications, but to potential executive producers. I sent the sample to potential partners and distributors, and I also sent it to a contact at the New York Times. Now, at the time, the New York Times was one of the few online platforms that was well known for working with independent filmmakers to showcase their works in progress. There are other platforms that do this now, but the New York Times remains important in terms of exposure, in terms of prestige, and it's a platform that distributors are looking at. So I was very fortunate. My contact at the Times loved the sample, and we very quickly had a meeting. You know, within a matter of weeks, I went to the New York Times and sat down with them and discussed the possibility of creating a short specifically for their platform, for the New York Times website, based on one of the characters in the film. And I spent the next month or so doing this. And it was, although I didn't realize it at the time, really the first important step in my distribution plan. What I was doing was I was building my audience and creating partnerships. And I was already in that self-hybrid column of distribution because I was taking control of these relationships. So if we have time later, I will show you the New York Times short. It's 8 minutes long. So you can always watch it, by the way. You can go to the New York Times website. And if you, or I can also provide a link. But if you go to the New York Times website, and if you just search Swim Team Autism, it will come up because it lives on their site now forever. Now, one of the things, it's also on YouTube, by the way, but that's what I was going to say, that they pushed this film, this short that I made, onto their various social channels. So they put the film on Facebook, they put it on Twitter, and they had it on YouTube as well. So it got a tremendous amount of exposure. It had probably tens of thousands of views. I'm sorry, I'm not giving you a number. I should give you a number, but it got a lot of attention. And it essentially acted like a Kickstarter or crowdfunding campaign. People started donating spontaneously, even though it wasn't an official crowdfunding campaign. So it would have been a good time to launch a crowdfunding campaign. And so I do recommend that if you are thinking of a crowdfunding campaign, doing something like this simultaneously is really smart. having a partner platform that's willing to stream a short or a sample in conjunction can really make a difference. Now, what I did do, and I also recommend this too, is I had set up a donation button on my website. Now in the United States, you have to have foundation status, it's called, to get tax deductible contributions, which is more preferable for people, for a lot of people who want to donate to a documentary. So I didn't have foundation status. I worked with what's called a fiscal sponsor. And there are organizations, there's a great one that I like called Women Make Movies, but there's also the Independent Documentary Association, IDA, offers fiscal sponsorship. Gotham, formerly IFP, offers fiscal sponsorship. But if you set up with a fiscal sponsor for your film, then you can accept tax deductible donations. And that's what I did. I had a button on my website, and people started donating. And the beauty of this whole situation was I started collecting names of new friends of this film, new funders to add to my mailing list. And setting up a website, being able to capture emails for a mailing list is pretty important. It's something that you should do as soon as you can as an independent filmmaker interested in independent distribution. Ideally, you do it while you're still in production so that all the people that you meet while you're in production can come to your website and add their names, and you can add them. A word about websites. They're very important. And as soon as you start working on a new project, you should really start planning your website. You should have it up and running as soon as you're pitching, for sure. As soon as you're talking, trying to get support, you should have a professional, beautifully designed place, home online, where people can find you and find your project. So I did decide to launch my site before the New York Times piece ran. So I was able to capture emails. I was able to capture donations. And it really was an incredible boost for my film. So yeah, let's see if we have time to watch that later if you're interested. But otherwise, you can find it on the New York Times website. So I'm going to take a step back now, just talk in general about what the major things are that you should be thinking about when you're thinking about planning your strategy for distribution. So all of these components matter. The first one obviously is you have to just be clear on what's important to you. What matters? What are your goals with this film? Is money important? Making money? Is inspiring change in the world? Advancing your career? Now, you don't have to pick just one. You can have more than one, but it's important to be clear on what your priorities are, because that will help inform your approach to distribution. Now, I was offered a couple of those all rights deals that I mentioned to you before, but they were not, neither one of them offered. I was offered two, actually, from two different companies, distribution companies. Neither one offered to pay me very much at all. And that mattered to me. Income matters. So I was inclined to turn those deals down, and I did. So what your goals are should inform your strategy, for sure. Number 2 on the list, team. This maybe should be number 1, but you need a team. I mentioned this before. You need, you can't do this all by yourself. So you need to figure out, how you're working with others. Now, in my case, I actually hired a couple of part-time, I called them outreach coordinators to help me. And I also hired a professional booker to take charge of my theatrical release in what's known as a service deal, meaning I had retained the theatrical rights to my film and I hired a professional, to run the release. And I'll talk to you about that a little bit further later. I also hired publicists at strategic times during the distribution process. So even though I'm a very lean operation, I had people on the team, and that made a big difference. So audience, that's number 3. Audience really is something that you have to figure out. Everyone wants their films to be, I think, seen by as wide of an audience as possible. But to maximize your reach, I would argue that you need to figure out who are your film's biggest fans. Who is most passionate? What type of person is most passionate about your film? Because these are the people who will want to buy it. They will want to share it with their networks and their friends. They'll want to host events to screen it. So ideally, you want to identify who these people are before you're finished, so that you can find them, you can locate them, and they will lead you to partners, and they will lead you to make meaningful distribution decisions. So, for example, with my film, Swim Team, I thought my film was going to be popular with families who had children with autism and developmental disabilities. That was who I thought my film's, most passionate core audience would be. But once the New York Times piece was out, I learned that our film was also really popular with swimming teams, professionals in the competitive swimming world who weren't necessarily connected to disability or even interested in disability, coaches, YMCA people. So I was learning also that the story was resonating with people who worked in the field of autism as lawyers, therapists, educators. So this was expanding my, my sense of who would like the film. And I applied this knowledge to start building a database of people and organizations to reach out to for fundraising, partnership, and ultimately to offer screenings to. And we're going to talk about that soon. So partners, number 4. In some cases, distributors are your partners. I like to say that with this independent strategy in general, your distributors are your partners. So the theatrical booker who I mentioned, that was one of my partners in this process. Partners can also be nonprofits, NGOs that share your mission. Now, I met with multiple autism organizations early while I was still in production to propose that we work together. And I was able to forge relationships actually with a couple major autism nonprofits. And when I was ready, they helped with the rollout of the film. They helped with promotion, they helped with booking screenings, setting up screenings. And I would definitely encourage you to research the organizations, the nonprofits, the NGOs that care about the themes of your film, and reach out to them. Try to forge relationships, explore how your film can be helpful to them, and suggest ways that you can work together. I offered Swim Team as a programming option to an organization in my home state, New Jersey. It's called Autism New Jersey, and I offered it to them for their annual conference. And they really liked that idea because it fulfilled their need to offer relevant quality programming to their constituency. And it fulfilled my need to reach one of my core audiences. So it can be mutually beneficial to forge ties with partners. So number 5, controlling the rollout. So ideally, you want to be in control of the rollout of your film. And what this means is you decide how long each window of distribution will last. The more control you have and the more flexibility, the more revenue you can tease out. You don't want your film on all platforms at once to start. And you should never offer it for free publicly as long as you plan to earn income, to make money. You need to think about the different channels of distribution and how you can exploit them. And we'll talk about this soon. And finally, the marketing and publicity is definitely an important part of the whole process, and it can be expensive. So you need to determine and be strategic about when it makes the most sense to spend money. So I was able to generate my own marketing and publicity with the New York Times story. And by the way, they paid me for that. It was a licensing deal. But I'll be honest with you and tell you that I lost money in making it, that they didn't pay me, as much as I needed. But I decided that it was worth doing for all the reasons that I mentioned before. And it just provided me with a tremendous amount of publicity and marketing. But later in my process, I did hire publicists to coincide with my film festival debut and later with the film's theatrical debut. And I'm going to get into the details of all of this with you so that you understand the process. So I mentioned an organization before called Gotham. It's now called IFP. It's in the upper left-hand corner there. Getting back to my distribution journey and the step-by-step process, after the New York Times story, which was before I finished my film, it was really before I was in the midst of editing the film. But just a refresher that I got a really great injection of public enthusiasm and donations. So after that, I set out to actually edit and finish the film. And that process, by the way, took about six months or so. It was stretched out over a longer period of time because there's a lot of stopping and starting when you're applying for funding. So the 6 months was perhaps stretched to 9 or 10. And the next key step really in the distribution journey happened also before the film was finished, before it was fully edited. And it was a program that I applied for and was invited to called IFP Week. It's now called the Gotham Week, and that's in the upper left-hand corner of the slide. But you can see that there are a number of organizations that offer programs like this, and this is just a sampling. You really need to do your research. They're all over the world. But what Gotham Week is, and it's an international opportunity, and so I would definitely encourage you to look into it. What it is it's a week that takes place every year in New York, and maybe they're doing it virtually this year. I'm not sure. Well, you'll have to look into it if you're interested. But what the Gotham does is they select a group of films and filmmakers, documentary, narrative, serial, digital, there are different categories. These are projects from all over the world. And you're invited to participate in this week, which is when I did it live, it was in New York. You go to New York for a week and you have an opportunity to pitch your project to a select group of buyers, distributors, agents, and film festival representatives. So all of these organizations, by the way, that I have on my slide here are selective, like Gotham. So you have to apply, and you really have to put your best foot forward with an excellent sample, as well as proposal and supporting materials. But the great thing about participating in one of these programs is it really helps you find the partners you need for your distribution strategy. When I took Swim Team to IFP week, I met the sales agent who would later help me pitch my film to broadcasters. I met the people who were choosing the slate for PBS's POV, for example, and they would ultimately be my broadcasting partner. I met film festivals that were interested in my film before it was edited, and whom I could reach out to when I was planning for my film festival debut. And I met the guy who ran the company that would handle my theatrical release. And I mentioned this before, it was a service deal. So these programs are invaluable for independent filmmakers, and I highly recommend that you research them and you apply to them. And again, these are just a sampling. Sundance does programs like this, the Film Independent, Chicken and Egg does programs for women filmmakers, IFP, now called Gotham. They also have, these organizations also have lab programs. And I had such a great experience at IFP week that I applied to their documentary lab program. And it's a year long. And fortunately, I was accepted to that program as well. So that was another opportunity to connect with industry people and organizations, and was helpful. So next I want to talk about partnerships. Partnerships are really important, and they can be the key to successful independent documentary distribution. Partnering with an organization that shares your film's mission can be the best way for you to access your film's core audience. So in my case, I mentioned before that we discovered that one of the groups our film was meaningful to was professionals and people who worked as service providers in serving individuals with autism and developmental disabilities. So in researching organizations to partner with, I found Easter Seals. Easter Seals is one of the oldest international nonprofit organizations that supports individuals with developmental disabilities. I reached out to them. I told them that I thought that our missions were aligned in promoting the capabilities of people with autism and advocating for inclusion. And we had a number of phone calls and meetings. I actually flew out to Chicago to their headquarters, and they were very interested in working together. Ultimately, they gave me funding to help with the marketing and promotion of the film, and they helped promote the film. This was a relationship that took months to develop. So I don't want to give the wrong impression that it was easy. Sometimes it takes longer than months, by the way, to develop this kind of relationship. So please keep that in mind. And here you can see just a few examples of the way they promoted Swim Team on their website. And they had tens of thousands of regular visitors to their website. So they were promoting access to us, to their community. One of these is a Q&A that they did with me, that they posted. They also did their own review of the film. They did their own promotion of the film. They sent out newsletters, including this content, and they also had it living on their website, and it's still there. You can still find it, which is great years later. So I'm a big proponent of seeking these kind of partnerships out. If you're making a social issue documentary, you know, any kind of social issue film, really, not just for documentary, you should research the organizations that care about your issue. Find out who's serving the people your film is featuring, who's serving, you know, the characters, the subjects of your film, and look into what organizations have already amassed an audience that would want to see your film. So forging relationships with these kind of organizations, you know, is a process, like I mentioned before. We actually, and it's not always easy, we tried to partner with a number of organizations. I had a list, you know, I had a list maybe with 20 to start that I was trying for. And some were completely unresponsive. Some rejected us. Even Easter Seals took nurturing. There was more that I wanted to do with Easter Seals, but you take what you can get. But, you know, for example, I tried to enlist them in booking screenings for all of their satellite offices. They had over 40 offices all over the country, in the United States alone, and they also had some foreign offices. But that did not happen. I wanted them to buy a license to screen in all of their offices, and that didn't end up happening because each of the satellite offices had their own agenda and their own budget. But what we were able to do is this content that I showed you before, which ran on their website and social channels. And that definitely drove traffic to our website. It translated to awareness, to sales of screenings, DVDs, digital downloads. And I mentioned that they gave me funding. So a word of advice on how to ask for money from a nonprofit or an NGO. We made an ask that was specific. I asked them for money specifically for a trailer, the trailer that you just saw, actually. So I knew that I needed to make one, and I wanted it to be really great. So I hired a professional trailer producer, and it wasn't cheap. And I told Easter Seals what it cost, and I offered them to co-brand the trailer, meaning that I offered that I would include their logo so that every time the trailer ran, the trailer would be promoting their brand. And everywhere the trailer, you know, was seen online and movie theaters, it would include this Easter Seals logo. And they really liked that idea. And that, you know, that was our arrangement. They gave us money. We co-branded the trailer, and I also put their logo on my website. So if you visit swimteamthefilm.com, www.swimteamthefilm.com, you'll see that their logo is on my website and is living there. And it was really a win-win relationship with Easter Seals, I think. So, you know, that's just one way to partner with an organization. There are lots of options for ways to work with an organization. For example, you can ask a foundation or NGO to buy a sponsorship for a television broadcast. PBS in the United States, for example, will let you create a sponsored by promo at the beginning or end of your film. So you can ask, you could also ask a foundation to host a virtual screening and plan it so the screening happens on their website or your website. I recommend your website so that the traffic is driven to your website, where you can capture emails and later sell DVDs or digital downloads. So the possibilities are really endless in terms of how you can partner with an organization, what you can do together with an organization that shares your mission. Conferences are similar. You know, it's another aspect of partnership to consider, because a lot of NGOs and nonprofits have conferences, and conferences are a great opportunity to showcase a documentary. So one of the organizations that I targeted for partnership was Autism New Jersey. I mentioned this earlier. And our film took place in New Jersey. It was about teens with autism, and Autism New Jersey is an organization that happens to have a national reputation for research and for advocacy. And we wanted very much to work together. I started reaching out during post-production to share the news about our film and to start a dialogue and to see how we could work together. And they ended up being an excellent resource for me for fact checking. And they also showcased our film at their annual conference, which was a great way for us to meet or really make our core audience aware of the film. The screening happened right as we were embarking on our film festival run. The first part of our distribution calendar that I'm going to talk about soon. And this screening at the Autism New Jersey conference generated many more screening events. We got a number of calls for screenings from folks who saw the film at the conference and wanted to bring it to their schools or communities. So the event was really a marketing success. And Autism New Jersey promoted the event, and then they promoted our later television broadcast. They did email blasts to over 10,000 people. And these people, these are our core audience. These are our people who care about autism. So there's a lot of power to this kind of marketing. Now at the conference itself, you can see in this photo here, I brought the cast of the film, and we had a really great Q&A after the screening. These kind of events with the filmmaker and the cast can earn revenue and also provide excellent engagement with your audience, with your core audience. So this screening really ended up being one of the most popular events, I think, in our journey of distribution, but also it was one of the most popular events at the conference that year. Autism New Jersey, they do feedback surveys after their events, and so they shared with us that this was a very, very popular event for the conference goers. So I would definitely suggest that you research conferences that focus on your film's topic, national, international, and try to establish relationships early, because sometimes these conferences are planned a year in advance. We reached out to Autism New Jersey a year in advance, and it was just a great opportunity for us to connect with our film's core audience. So about the timing. So I mentioned before, we screened the film actually after at the conference after our film's festival debut. But I want you to consider that you can have conference screenings even before your film debuts at a festival. And it shouldn't conflict with festival rules. Some festivals, we're about to talk about festivals. Some festivals insist that your film be a public debut. And conferences are not open to the public. So generally, you should check on a case-by-case basis. But you can keep that in mind. And Autism New Jersey, for example, was not open to the public. You had to register. It's an annual conference that's made available to professionals in the autism world, stakeholders, parents, and people have to pay to attend. So you do have some flexibility to exhibit your film even before an official debut to the public at a conference. And another thing to consider is that you can charge a larger fee for screening at a conference than your average community screening, depending on whether you offer a panel as the filmmaker, whether you're speaking in conjunction with the film, whether you have to travel to the conference. You can have a sliding scale of fees that you charge. And this conference, I'll tell you, actually ended up costing me to do. And I just decided it was a cost worth, that was worth it. Like the New York Times piece, that, we definitely got more out of doing this. And it was worth it, to eat the cost, to do it for free. But whenever you can, you should ask for fees for these kind of events. So that brings me to film festivals. This is not a ranking. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of film festivals, a lot of information about film festivals out there, and you need to educate yourself. I am a huge proponent of film festivals. You do not need to incorporate film festivals into your distribution journey, but I think that there's a lot that film festivals can offer. And in this last year, we have seen the live festival transition to a virtual festival pretty smoothly. And though I hope that we can all go back to live festivals, I really do, sooner rather than later. It's nice to know that virtual festivals are a thing now, and and they work. So this is good. My film actually played at over 50 festivals, and our festival run lasted for over a year. I learned so much at film festivals. It really solidified my distribution plan. And so I want to spend a little bit of time on festivals. So this list represents the most prominent international festivals that matter to the biggest global distributors for documentary filmmakers. It's really a starting point. You should, again, research festivals, and there are websites. There are great websites that you can use, like, for example, Film Freeway, which is a website that I really like a lot. I use to research festivals and to manage my festival submission process. So keep in mind, so there's been much emphasis, I'm sure you know, placed on where your film premieres. And it is fabulous and undoubtedly promising for a film to debut at Sundance. Nothing wrong with that. But if you don't get into Sundance or any of the top tier festivals for a premiere, it's not the end of the world. And I think it's important, to understand this. You should try. You should absolutely, try for Sundance. You should research the festival deadlines and make sure that you apply on time. You should learn the festival rules. Sundance, for example, will not accept your film if you've shown it publicly, and no top tier festival will. So do your homework, understand this. Don't put your film up on YouTube before you want to apply to one of these festivals. And I highly recommend actually going or attending a virtual festival that you're interested in. So, for example, I went to Sundance a number of times before my film was finished, actually, during the period when I was developing my film and producing in production, in post. Before I was ready to apply, I attended Sundance. And it's a great way to learn how festivals work by attending. You can meet the industry people who frequent festivals. You can see other films like yours or not like yours. So when I went to Sundance the year before my film was finished, I met a distribution consultant. His name is Peter Broderick, and he helped me plan my film's distribution strategy. So I'm very grateful, actually, to Sundance for that. I decided not to apply to Sundance, and I'll tell you why. Because of the schedule, the festival deadline is in the fall, and my film was finished months and months and months before the fall. And I realized that I would have to sit on it basically and wait to apply. And I was nervous about that. I was concerned about my film being stale. I wanted to get it out. And I realized I had a certain amount of momentum that had been created by the New York Times piece. So I chose another top festival that I thought would be, in fact, easier for my film to get into and was more aligned with my film's finishing schedule. So you have to be aware of the festival deadlines in order to make these kind of decisions. And you also should be aware and keep in mind that some regional festivals or specialized festivals might really be the best debut for your film, might really showcase your film best. So we had a great experience, for example, at a festival called Doc NYC. And this is their swim team webpage. It's in New York. Doc NYC is a festival that's only for documentaries. And our film was made in New York and New Jersey and focused on a New Jersey-based swim team. So to screen the film in New York at Doc NYC was really the perfect venue. Our local story really shined, and we were able to invite local influencers and press to build excitement and momentum. And all the while we were spending time and energy on social media and growing our fan base. We started sending out announcements to our mailing list. We asked for donations to fuel our distribution. Doc NYC was really a great success for us. We sold out the festival screening. They added another. And I also learned at Doc NYC that our film played really well on a big screen. People, they laughed along with certain moments in the film, and they gasped and they cheered the swim team. The whole cinematic experience was one that I hadn't had a chance to really observe before, working in an edit room, for example. And to see the way the festival audience responded to the film was important in terms of the decisions that I made after. I also saw that people wanted to talk about the film after it's screened. A lot of film festivals have Q&As, and the Q&As are limited because festivals book screenings in the same space, and they schedule screenings back to back. So it was rare to have a festival Q&A that was more than 20 minutes. And our Doc NYC Q&A was probably about 20 minutes. But what happened at that Q&A was everyone wanted to keep talking, even though we had to stop. I realized that the live event for this film mattered. So I decided that I wanted a robust screening campaign, that I wanted a theatrical release, that I wanted community screenings, and I knew I needed to raise funding in order to do this. You need a distribution budget, it's true. So these became priorities of mine, having a theatrical release, having community screenings, and no distributor that I had met at that point seemed to care about these channels of distribution for my film. So that, going back to the list of priorities, I recognized that it didn't make sense for me, for a number of reasons now, to take an all rights deal. So after Doc NYC, we were able to book many more festivals. I actually hired someone to help with festival bookings. This is another team member that I recommend. And this was just a part-time person who was working with me for a few months. And once I learned what was involved, I took over. And I mentioned before, there are great tools like Film Festival, Film Freeway, for example, that allows you to search for festivals, apply, manage the submission process online. And I used Film Freeway. But the other thing I did was I pitched festival directors directly, festival programmers. I researched who they were, I emailed them, and I asked that they waive entry fees. And this is important too, because it can be expensive to apply to festivals. And some of the festival directors were fine with it, and they waived the fees. Others weren't, but wouldn't budge. But there's really no harm in trying. Some festivals will pay travel fees if they're live festivals, and screening fees. Some will pay. Will offer in-kind hotel, meals. So it's really, I think, important to ask and see what you can get, because otherwise it can be cost prohibitive to do festivals, and festivals are I think really fun and important. You get to, as I say, gauge your film's response, audience reaction, participate in Q&As, meet fellow filmmakers, and you can do all of this virtually as well. So not much has changed, which is nice in our new normal. So these are just the takeaways from my film festival strategy. Another thing I want to just mention is that some festivals care about whether or not your film has been broadcast or streamed. Others may not. So I actually have booked a handful of festivals after my film aired on television in North America and streamed on Netflix. And I even won an award at one of these festivals. So festivals can be useful and add value. And they're just, I can't tell you how much fun they are. I mean, they're just, I can't say enough. They're just so much fun. So finally, one more note is, if you decide to premiere your film at a festival, I do think you should plan on hiring a publicist to help market and publicize your debut. It's great to use the opportunity to get a review in a trade publication. We were able to get a Hollywood Reporter review, for example, in conjunction with our film's debut on the festival circuit. And I think that was money well spent. It's, one of the best reviews that our film received, and it's on our website, and, we used it in our marketing material right away. So think about that as well. These are just some fun photos from festivals. Fun. Okay, here is the calendar of distribution. The order, it represents a recommended order of distribution, and it's the order that I followed. So windows are the period of time during which you release your film to a certain market. Windows can overlap. For example, we started selling community screenings and conferences, number 2, during the film festival window. And our film festival window, I just mentioned, extended beyond number 5, beyond our television window. So I think the important takeaway here is, please don't do all of this at the same time. Please don't put your film on a platform for free right away. My film started on the film festival circuit in 2016 and has never been on a platform for free, for more than a very limited amount of time as part of a plan. For example, there were times when it was streamable on PBS's app in North America for free. This was after our television debut, and it was for a limited time. My film has never been downloadable for free. Controlling your rollout and controlling these windows allows you to sell your film and make revenue. It's as simple as that. Okay. So this is a screening event that we had at Comcast, which is a major television cable company in the United States. And they wanted to present a program to their employees that would support their staff. They actually had employees with autism, and they had employees who had family members with autism. And their human resources department organized a panel discussion with myself and staff members to discuss the film after the screening. And they included an employee with autism on the panel. They had great snacks that you can see. It was a very well-attended event at their corporate headquarters and in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, in the United States. And we made a deal that they would be able to stream the film on their internal system to their thousands of employees who worked in various offices elsewhere in the country. And this ended up being a really nice source of revenue for me, and tipped me off that I should target more human resources departments of corporations interested in diversity and inclusion. So this is the beauty of a list that can grow, and an email campaign that can ebb and flow. We started pitching community and corporate events to our list to coincide with the film festival run of the film. But then I decided how and when to relax and step up the effort. And we got busy around the theatrical premiere and the TV launch. So I slowed the community screening work. And after the TV launch, I stepped it up again. So I did a more aggressive campaign around Autism Awareness Months, which are in April. Every year I do a mailing to remind people that they can screen the film in and around April. And for years, I've been able to book dozens of screenings in April, actually. So depending on your film's issues, you can find dates or months of the calendar to target, and you can send out a new wave of emails to your growing list. It's easy when I recommend using a CRM, a customer relationship management system, to organize your emails, to do mail merges. And the one that I use is Streak, actually, STREAK, which integrates with Gmail. And it helps to organize your contacts and helps you manage sales. Now that may seem like a dirty word to you, to some of you maybe, sales. It did to me, I'll be honest. But as an independent filmmaker, you have no choice but to educate yourself about sales and best practices in sales if you want to have a sustainable career. So here are just some examples of the organizations that hosted screening events of Swim Team. In some instances, we created flyers for them. Others created their own flyers. We developed a package of materials that we provide to every screening host that includes the film, whether it's a DVD, a Blu-ray, a digital version of the film. We also provide a guide to hosting a screening. We provide postcards. We provide a discussion guide. We had a great guide that was made for us by PBS. But there are companies that will make you a guide for an affordable price, or you can make it yourself. We also provided templates for press releases, artwork for flyers. Most of this is in a digital package that I would provide to screening hosts. And I also made myself available to countless screening hosts to explain how to go about the process. And my outreach coordinators, who I mentioned before, they did this too. One thing that we did that I would encourage you to do is we collected and still collect audience data. I asked community hosts to share their audience names and contacts, and I add these people to my mailing list. And there are various ways to do this, by the way. At one point, I actually offered a ticketing option to screening hosts on a platform that I managed for them. There are a number of platforms that do this. And if you're managing virtual screenings, you should absolutely look into the different platforms and find the one that's best for you. But the ability to collect audience data is invaluable, especially if you're planning on making more films that would appeal to your audience. Then you can keep going back to your audience with your new films. So I'm a huge believer in community screenings and screening events in general. They can be a significant source of revenue. There's nothing better in terms of audience engagement and potential for impact. And it's pretty important that you retain these rights to sell these screenings. I ended up working with several distribution partners, including an educational sales and digital sales partner, but this channel of distribution, community screenings, events, this channel was the most lucrative for me. I want to say a word about educational sales because there are companies that specialize in educational sales, meaning selling to universities and libraries. You can manage this channel of distribution by yourself, meaning with your team. But I opted not to because you don't have to do everything. And I don't think you can do everything well if you try to do everything. So I recognized I wanted to focus on community screenings. So, and selling to educational institutions means building a different set of contacts. And I thought the professional educational sales distributors were better positioned than me to make these sales. So you can buy lists, you can buy lists of librarians that buy films for universities and libraries, for example, but I actually don't recommend that you buy lists simply because contacts are constantly changing at these places and lists easily become stale. So that's my take on lists. This is our PBS discussion guide. Just wanted to show you what it looks like. It's actually on the PBS website. This is the one that they made for us, and we would provide it digitally to all of our screening hosts. Going back to this calendar of distribution, and to our step-by-step process. So once again, I just want to, I guess I can't say this enough. You really, you can't manage every channel of distribution on your own. So you need a team. You should delegate. I delegated half of this list. And going back to my step-by-step process with Swim Team, after our film festival run, which lasted about a year, and we won some awards, we got some great press, we were able to raise the money we needed to have the theatrical release. That's really when I realized that I was engaging in independent distribution, because I had been offered a couple of distribution deals, remember, but neither included a theatrical release. Neither were good deals. Distribution costs, it costs money, and theatrical releases cost money. And I researched what was necessary, and I ended up hiring a wonderful theatrical booker, and we executed a limited release, which is a release to art house theaters. This happened before a television broadcast. At the same time that I was planning for the theatrical, I was able to get a TV deal with PBS's POV. You don't actually need an agent to do this, but I had a great agent. I was fortunate that I found an agent back at IFP Week, now called Gotham Week, another great reason to try to attend Gotham. And my agent helped me get the POV deal. And it was important to coordinate the theatrical so that theatrical was finished before the TV debut, going back to the concept of windows. And fortunately, POV was amenable, PBS's POV. So we never stopped the community screenings, though. I'll let you know. We just slowed them down. So I had started community screenings back when I started my film festival run. And those have been ongoing. I did engage publicists to promote the theatrical release, and the publicists enhanced the ability to sell community screenings too. So as I gained more press, I was able to add the press to the website. And on the website's front page, you can now see we have all these great pull quotes from reviewers, and your website can evolve. You can see as your distribution journey evolves and as your press evolves. But when we started off, I remember when this front page only had one laurel, and then it was 2 or 3 festival laurels, and now you can see it's a lot of stuff. So just going back to this distribution calendar, I'll just quickly finish my my journey, and then would love to hear from your questions. So I brought on a partner to deal with my digital sales, which encompasses iTunes, Amazon, the on-demand downloads, as well as subscription services like Netflix. You can pitch these entities yourselves. You can save money that way, and make, earn more money. But I decided that I wanted to work for a partner, in part because I decided I really wanted a Netflix deal, and I didn't think I could get it on my own. So I decided to work with a partner that I was pretty sure was going to get me the Netflix deal, and did. So there are reasons to work with partners. That's one reason. That goes back to the priorities that I mentioned before. I also want to mention that, and this is important, that I recommend retaining the right to sell the film from your website, which is something that I did. So I sell the film from my website, and I always have. And you can see I have a buy page on my website. So I definitely recommend that you do that. And I also have a host a screening page on my website. And it was hard for me to cut to display the website properly on the slide, but I recommend that you go to my website at swimteamthefilm.com and take a look at the different options on the toolbar. Please take a look at the host a screening page. But this is really important. If you want to book screenings, you have to make it easy for community screening hosts, and you have to provide them with reviews, reasons to book the screening. So so we did that, and I've now reached number 9. I'm now up to international sales with Swim Team. Some people, by the way, reach this stage earlier. If you get a global Netflix deal, which I did not get, you can be selling internationally earlier in your journey, but that's not what happened with Swim Team. And I'm working with an international distributor, and that's one of my partners. And I definitely recommend an international sales distributor as opposed to trying to do it yourself. But you should research it, but it's just one of those, another specified body of contacts and knowledge. And I decided again that I only had enough bandwidth with community screenings and corporate events that I've been doing all along, and I continue to do. So I chose personally not to do the international sales, and I'm having someone else do it. And I'm actually very happy with what they're doing and the television broadcasts that we've been able to get in other countries, and the digital deals. And I was willing to cut my film down. We can talk about that if you're interested. because they convinced me, my international sales distributor convinced me that I could sell more films internationally if I made it an hour. It's 100 minutes. So I've been talking for a long time. I hope I didn't go over the Q&A time. Just want to show you, this is a nice fun screening we had with Robert De Niro, which was one of the highlights for sure of our whole distribution journey. So I want to give everyone an opportunity to ask questions, and so why don't we do that? Are there any, what do you think? Any questions?
Yes, for those who have questions, as I mentioned, you will need to ask them in Q&A part. So at this point, we don't have. But I think we will get them. I will also check it on Facebook because it is lively broadcasted there and people may ask questions there. So checking there.
I see some questions. Do you see that?
Yeah. Do you want me to read it? So
sure. Yeah. Why don't you read that?
Yes. So the question is from Leana Sambatian. Thanks for informative talk. I have two questions. Why you went through SVOD sales and only after that you did international sales? And the second question, do you think that the scheme is the same for this distribution in Europe and Asia?
Okay, so so subscription video on demand sales, maybe I'll get back to my distribution calendar so you can see. So the subscription video on demand sales, this is not, okay, so this order is what is really what developed with my film. And it's not, you don't have to follow this order. And I mentioned before that if you are fortunate enough to get a global SVOD deal, like with Netflix, for example, then that's wonderful and congratulations. And, you know, you would do that first. Like that would be your international, it would be everything, right? It could supplant your television. You could forego television and go straight to, you know, a Netflix global deal. You could even forego educational sales. I wasn't offered that kind of a deal. And it's rare to get that kind of a deal. You know, I don't want to give you guys the wrong impression. I was, you know, saying this before, like that's very few documentaries get those kind of deals. So I didn't have that kind of a deal, and I wanted very much to exploit these different windows. You know, I wanted to be able to do educational sales, which, by the way, I didn't specify, you know, can earn you more revenue, obviously, than, you know, digital downloads and DVDs. So that's why you want to do it sooner in your rollout. In terms of number two, do you think the scheme is the same for the distribution in Europe and Asia? I think you can focus on your, yes, I think you can focus on your particular country and apply this to your country, and, you know, consider everything up until number 5 really happening nationally. And, you know, the television, I'd want to go to your national broadcaster, and then think of going wider beyond your country and Europe and Asia. Asia's kind of difficult. It's different. It's difficult. China, you know, is kind of a world in and of itself. We could have a separate seminar on China. What I'm talking about doesn't really apply. I don't know, you know, we'd have to have a separate discussion about China. and Russia.
And probably other countries as well, because I think that in Europe it works in a different way, definitely, especially in France. So
well, the national broadcast is still something I would shoot for up until number 5. I would follow this. I would actually follow this schedule if you were in France, for example, up until number 5, in your country. This is all, and up until number 5 worked for me too, in my country too. You can do international festivals for sure. And, not compromise a national television broadcast. It's I think you can talk in terms of moving gradually. Do you see how this is kind of a pyramid, and it's making your film available to a larger and larger audience, starting with a small select audience with film festivals, and then we're slowly building, and wide. That's the idea. Anyway.
So let me check. It was so productive and so overwhelming in a good way that there are no questions. So, and I think there is a feedback for you in a chat part, which is from Tatya. Thank you, Lara, for very interesting insight. I'm asking, as a director, how many years you were working first on film and then on distribution? What is full time, and could you do anything else beside of this? Probably, was it a full time, or did you have a time to do something else besides?
So good question. I worked full time on the film from 2013 to when it was released in 2016. So it was about 3 years of full-time work, development, production, post-production. And I explained that some of the distribution planning and strategizing was happening during that time. Then the distribution started, and I worked part-time on distribution and was able to start developing a new project. And in fact, I'm about to get started shooting a new project now. And up until now, I've been working part-time basically on distribution. So a lot of filmmakers will say, I don't want to work on distribution at all. Like, this goes back to the difference of models that we discussed. And if I had met you and spoke to you a few years ago, I would have told you, I don't want to work on distribution. That's not what I do. That's not my expertise. And I'm not interested. But, if you care about your film, then you have to, and your film is independent, then you have to get interested. You just have to, if you want your film to thrive and be seen.
I think we can take the last question. It's from Sakira Kosyan. Would you please tell about how much money did you spend only for the distribution stage, and how much did you collect it? If you don't want to share the numbers, maybe you can say it in proportion of percentage spent earned.
So the distribution budget was like a good 25% of the budget of the film. Oh. And I don't know if I can be more specific, only because I didn't prepare the numbers for you. So I don't want to. What I'll do is I can give you this later if you want to make it available. But I can tell you, it was about, the distribution budget was about 25% of the film. And the other thing I want to mention is that I had not raised this money when I embarked on the distribution plan. I raised the distribution budget during the film festival run. And that's one of the reasons, and I should have said this when I was talking about the importance of film festivals, that's one of the reasons why, film festivals can be so valuable. Because we did so well on the film festival circuit, we won 14 awards. We were at over 50 film festivals, all over the world. Because we did so well during that time period, I was able to raise the money for the distribution. It was much easier for me to raise the money then than it had been before. It was easier for me to raise distribution money than it was to raise production money. And that's just because we had a great film then that we could show people. And, you know, before, when I was trying to raise money for the film, I didn't have a finished film. I just had a proposal and a sample. And so that was an interesting lesson too.
I think we should take Ina's question as well. What do you think?
Okay, and this is the
last one. Thanks for the interesting talk. Unfortunately, most of the opportunities are for US filmmakers and so much harder in our region, but of course there is a slight chance for us as well. My questions are, we often listen that short version of a film online can kill the distribution or feature length. How did you manage that New York Times Online didn't ruin the festival and theatrical distribution? And please specify the decision on world premieres, international premiere, national premiere decision.
Okay, so I want to say that the US film festivals, US distributors are much more interested in international films than ever before. So I think that the outlook is very positive and hopeful. And the programs that I mentioned, the Gotham Week, Sundance, Chicken and Egg, Film Independent, all of these organizations are trying to nurture filmmakers from places beyond the United States as well. So that's all very hopeful. So don't be discouraged. And in terms of the short version, so the film that I made for the New York Times was specifically made for the New York Times. It was not an excerpt. And I think that's an important point. It was made before we edited the film. And in fact, I didn't show it to you. You can see it when you go to the Times. But after I finished the film, I actually, preferred people to see the film and not the short, because I think the film is, it's just stronger work. But they're different, obviously. There are actually rules, the Academy, if you're interested in Academy eligibility and Oscar eligibility, you can't release you can't release more than a certain amount of your film before your film debuts. So I was very much aware of that. And there are just other concerns for why you wouldn't want to, it was over 8 minutes, my short for the Times. There are reasons why you wouldn't necessarily want to reveal that much of your actual film. So it wasn't, it was a different short, it was based on my work in progress is what I say. It was based on my film in progress, and featured one of my characters. And for your number 2 question, so this was tricky. The whole film festival premiere business, you don't have as much decision making as you would like. You can have goals, like I said, you can, decide to try for Sundance, but a lot of this is out of your hands. And that was very frustrating for me as somebody who likes to plan and likes to be in control. So, we had planned for a specific world premiere. It didn't work out. I thought I was having a specific international premiere. That didn't work out either. And we could talk about this like endlessly because I learned a lot about this. I learned actually a lot about how you can still have a successful film, even if you don't have the premieres that you want. You can still make an impact with your film. You can still make money with your film. You can still make a career with your film, even if you don't have the premieres that you want. And I can't emphasize that enough. And I'll tell you that our world premiere was at the Hot Springs Documentary Film Festival, which is it's over 25 years running in the United States, just documentaries, well regarded. We won an award at that festival, so that was really nice. Our international premiere was Glasgow, Scotland, they also did something really special for our film and had a special autism event where they invited people with autism to screen it. And we also had a wonderful New York premiere at Doc NYC, which I mentioned before, that, you know, was also really meaningful for us. So that's just a little bit on festival premieres.
Thank you very much. And many thanks from Ina, by the way. I think we should wrap up now. I really want to thank you for the talk and for providing your time and being with us now. Also, I want to thank our participants, the attendees who were listening to the talk and asking their questions. And many thanks to translators for the translation. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
So goodbye. Hopefully to see you in Yerevan soon, or one day at least.
Oh, I'd love that. I'd love that.